I'd like to deal with question 2738 tonight, Synagogues in the New Testament. Dear Dr. Price, I was curious to hear your perspective on using the historical existence of synagogues as a terminus post quem for the dating of the writing of the Gospels. The four New Testament Gospels each make clear references to Jesus' teaching in synagogues, and yet there seems to be no clear consensus from the archaeological community as to when the earliest synagogues were built. Dates for the construction of the first synagogues range from the 3rd century BCE to after the destruction of the temple in 70 CE. I'm suspicious, however, that the early dates for synagogue construction may be the result of a Christian apologetic attempt to defuse what would otherwise be a clear indication that the Gospel records are ahistorical. My question then is twofold. First, what does the archaeological evidence suggest for the dating of the earliest synagogue construction? And second, in the absence of any such archaeological evidence, what does our understanding of Judaism suggest might be the reason for constructing synagogues in the first place? Would the destruction of the temple in 70 CE provide just such a reason? That is from our buddy Terra Incognita, a.k.a. Scott. Yeah, you just took the words right out of my mouth. From what I know and understand, the evidence is that in the 1st century there are a couple of synagogues in predominantly Hellenistic Galilean cities, and Caesarea for one. And the idea of this is that the Herodians entertained diaspora Jews. They had already had synagogues, meeting places, is all that means, because they couldn't get to the temple all that often, and so they were used to synagogue worship. And when they came to Palestine or Israel, whatever you want to call it, there were synagogues there in these Hellenistic palaces and cities for them to attend. But these were not for the common people who didn't need them. They were close enough to the temple that they just went there 3 times a year as the Torah dictated. And therefore it's no big surprise that there is no evidence of any 1st century Galilean synagogues. All right. What then? We do find them after after 70 AD CE, and that is in the 2nd century in Galilee. And it seems to me obvious that's because people who had been very close to the temple in Judea and fled north after the Jewish war needed worship centers in lieu of the temple, and so Galilee became like the diaspora. People needed temples away from the temple, so to speak. And that's also why there are Pharisees after the fall of Jerusalem in the north, in Galilee. So it seems to me pretty clear, almost an open and shut case. I think it would seem so to anyone, except for the fact that, as you say, the Gospels depict Jesus arguing in synagogues as if they're houses of worship in Galilee and during the 1st third of the 1st century. It is a gross anachronism, as is the use of the title rabbi for Jesus. That was only catching on at the end of the 1st century. As René Salmus pointed out, there is no evidence for an inhabited Nazareth until the middle of the 1st century, a good 20 years after Jesus is said to have lived. So you just have all kinds of things retrojected back before the fall of Jerusalem by later Christians, it seems to me. So you're very astute with that question. Thanks for it.